One thing I'll never forget is the feeling that I first had when I crafted my first set of spirit color drums. And I'm sure a lot of y'all know what I'm talking about because crafting in Wizard101 used to be a gigantic part of what it meant to be a wizard. All it took was a short conversation with an NPC that could give you a crafting quest, and you were well on your way to making gear and spells that could completely revamp who you were as a wizard. And y'all, let's be honest, these were not the easiest recipes in the world. They actually presented a real challenge, and it made the actual experience feel very rewarding. Back in the day, if I wanted to craft something as insane as the Catalan spell, I would need hundreds and hundreds of reagents, and even some things that I would have to literally farm a dungeon for. Back when crafting quests did exist, they would unlock crazy rewards, and it would be hard to do these. Like the spirit color drums were notoriously hard because you'd have to craft conga drums first and then craft a couple of spirit color drums. It was a real side activity. And yet now crafting is a complete shadow of its former self. And that's why I wanted to make a video talking about what happened to it. Right now, any crafting recipe that they've literally released in the past 2 years, they all have one thing in common. It's the fact that you just have to farm a bunch of bosses and get a small amount of ground loot, and there you go, you've crafted what you need. There's no variety in reagents, there's no places that you have to actually go to in order to get the extra reagents. Crafting therefore feels passive and almost like not a real side thing on its own. It's almost like a ceremonial addition to every update rather than what it used to be. And don't even get me started on spells. These days, you don't even have to craft a spell. All you have to do is get 35 spell elements and you can unlock the spell like you crafted it. Now, here's the thing, right? If you're really only making your end goal to learn a spell or making your end goal to get a good piece of gear from the newest world, then obviously the current system of crafting is better, right? You don't have to spend as much time. It's probably less complicated, and honestly, it's very simple to do if you really put your mind to it. And while I'm glad that some things are easier in this game, I can't help but think that it's a lost opportunity that crafting has lost its former role. Crafting used to represent something completely separate from farming bosses, and that's something that is extremely lost nowadays. Let's say that you were a level 70 something, right? And you didn't want to farm waterworks. You didn't want to farm maybe the Tower of Helephant, maybe back in the day. The way crafting used to be is, let's say that you weren't the type of person to do a lot of combat to get your gear, you could literally get reagents. You could actually go out of your way to collect them. And while that might not seem like a big deal, it acted as a gigantic check against an overly grindy feeling, and it also acted as a valid alternative to pack gear that you could only buy with crown. For the longest time, you would have to open packs in order to get the best wand, whether you wanted to do PvP or PvE. And it seemed like this pattern where you had to buy stuff, like you had to literally buy crowns and you had to like use those crowns on packs. It felt like that was a pattern that would never get broken until they actually added a way to circumvent it through crafting. It was only through these recipes that we really saw an alternative that wasn't, actually deeply rooted in farming bosses or buying crowns to get gear that was actually, good. Like you could actually get gear that you could use, and it was very competitive and valid. And crafting was also so interesting and so actually well thought out back in the day that it went beyond spells and gear, and that's something that people don't even talk about anymore. You used to be able to create a whole house that had a whole arena and had its whole unique feel just through crafting. Why is it that we don't get this anymore? I think the reason people really fell in love with crafting is because it was such a reason to actually do stuff on this game, especially when it was optional and you didn't need to do it. And you can make crafting recipes as hard or easy as you want. And the flexibility of that difficulty, and also the fact that you can make really cool rewards like houses, just optional, right? The option of not even needing to do it. Those are all crazy big strengths for crafting, and I think a side activity that comes with so many strengths shouldn't be ignored the way that it is now. Crafting, believe it or not, is the singular reason that my wizard started gardening, because I wanted to literally garden for reagents, and also the only reason that I've ever had to engage with the fishing system in Wizard101. Imagine if they made more recipes for things that look really cool, or actually give you an in-game advantage, and they started involving things like fishing for rare fish in different areas, or maybe like gardening some seeds that you can't get easily. Imagine if they added added that while also adding a method where you could just farm for that gear. Imagine how vibrant the game would be when it came to the different ways you could get to the same end goal. Isn't that what an MMORPG is supposed to be all about? Engaging with all these different side systems to reach the goal that everyone has, which is your best stats, your best wizarding feel. Right, there should be different ways to get to the same endpoint, and I think crafting was the best vehicle for that, though it doesn't do that anymore. I think that they should add crafting recipes that involve fish so that they can, you know, add another side activity and get that involved. They should add more crafting recipes with really cool houses, really cool cosmetics, and if they do create entire templates at max level that are different, I think that crafting should be a bigger part of it, not just something where you make an Aeon gear into an Eternal gear. I'm saying like a whole new piece of gear that doesn't even look the same, like, you know, has a different vibe, and you craft it by revisiting different areas, farming for rare reagents, and maybe just one piece of that set that can be crafted comes with a cool benefit. If I had to theorize why crafting had such a big downfall in the last few years, I think I would have to point fingers at the Dragoon gear, and it's not because of, you know, like, you know, the crafting experience, you know, suddenly people, you know, were fed up with it. It's because Dragoon gear specifically was mad annoying to craft. It was basically like just farming hundreds and hundreds of times for the same reagents over and over again. It was nothing like getting a bunch of different reagents and putting it all together. Like, this is not the type of recipe that people see and they think, oh, this is crafting. I think the reason why people got annoyed at this so much was because it went against so much of what crafting originally felt like. Like, getting these reagents was all about just farming a bunch of extracts, making a bunch of extracts into salts, and then finally having enough to just, you know, craft the damn thing. That type of weird, linear, you know, grindy, you know, do the boss over and over and over again feel is pretty antithetical to what crafting was up to that point. And if they're using the unpopularity of Dragoon gear and the recipes associated with it as a reason not to keep doing stuff with crafting, I think that's the wrong takeaway. I think the actual execution on these specific recipes were very, very bad. I think if they brought back crafting and didn't repeat what they're doing with, you know, like Novus gear and Lemuria gear and what they did with Dragoon gear and truly made it feel like a side activity that you could really access a different part of the game, you know, every day to, like, you know, build yourself up to a recipe. If they got that type of vibe going again, I feel like it'd be just as good as regularly farming for the gear like people do right now for their gear. Maybe they do have plans for crafting that go beyond the very simple watered down version that it's become, but to me it really feels like, you know, a lost part of the game, and I think a lot of people can relate. If I were Wiz, I would add so many more recipes for so many things, mounts, pets, you know, cosmetics, spells, everything again, so we can feel like there's a real resurrection of that part of the game. But maybe that's just, let me know what y'all's opinions are on this one, my mans. I feel like a lot of people have a lot to say, because technically, you know, it is easier now, but technically, you know, it's like, like crafting is like barely a thing anymore. So what do you guys prefer? Do you guys prefer how they used to do things with crafting, or do you guys prefer it now? And what things could they do to crafting to make it a better part of the game compared to what it is now? Let me know y'all's opinions in the comments. Drop a like if you enjoyed, leave a sub if you're new, and as always, if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong, so stay awesome, y'all. And yeah.